Okay, so I'm back again, and we're gonna finish recording up the rest of this tier list because my computer couldn't handle all the space last time. Alright, so last time when we were focusing on, I was still on Basilio, um, going over his wisdom, and the fact that when he is flat out warned that he's going to die if he goes into the battle against Walhart later in the game, he still goes anyway, and he fakes his death, and he holds on for a long time, because I'm pretty sure until like the last, like 3 or 4 chapters of the game, you are under the impression that Basilio is dead, so he fakes his death, so he's like, oh, I had to give him wisdom to say, like, alright, I can't beat him, so I might as well fake my death and survive. So you do get access to Con Basilio and Con Flavia later in the game, but you only have them for a few chapters at this point. And their stats are different depending on which mode you're playing on. Whether it be easy, normal, lunatic. I'm pretty sure they have the same stats in Lunatic Plus. In Lunatic, I'm not sure because I actually haven't reached that far in Lunatic Plus, even though I'm doing a playthrough of it right now. Basilio's classes, I feel, are pretty good defensively. Because, like I said, I like to max out most of the character stats, and I was talking about supports. He gets one with male Robin, female Robin, Flavia, and male Morgan if you marry female Robin to him. So I feel like overall, since you don't get to use him that often, but since he's like a major character throughout the game and he's constantly like being around, with his personality being a combination of Vake and Gregor, that he kind of earns his spot in A, primarily just off personality, even though you don't get to use him all that often. I also noticed that I have skipped over 2 characters, being Gaius and Pan, or Pane. I'm just gonna call her Pan. We'll get back to them, unfortunately, because you do technically meet these characters first, but Con Flavia, in the same vein as Con Basilio, you don't have access to them for long. They are important characters throughout the game, is because they are constant entities in the war with Plegia and the war against Walhart, and then the war again, and like the war for the world when you fight Grima near the end. So Flavia, in a way, is kind of like Basilio, but a little bit more reserved. She tends to take things a slightly more seriously than Basilio does, and she, well, I guess you could say, it's like, again, if you took Vake's kind of like loud personality, but also kind of dialed it back a bit in a sense, because her character is like, oh, again, she's like Basilio, but not as loud and like ridiculous at times. In terms of her class, she starts off as the hero class, and again, she joins in the same chapter as Basilio, but you're also going to have trouble, trying to use her a lot more, because again, you only have her for a few chapters, unless you go out and go grinding, trying to go get her support. Again, she has like the same number of conversations as Basilio, male Robin, female Robin, Basilio, and then Morgan, female Morgan, if you marry her with Robin. So moving on to from there, because I feel like we need to kind of hurry this up. Gaius and Han. Oh look, another case of one over the other. You know what? Nah. I feel like Gaius can go into S tier as well. This is due to his supports with a few characters being pretty funny. Crom, and especially Robin. Because Gaius, I believe, with Crom, he kind of wants to go on Night in the Town. So Crom's like, I don't know how to live like around, like, quote unquote, commoners, or like the common masses. Is like, oh, Gaius kinda jokingly calls him out, and he has nicknames for pretty much everyone. Again, since I'm using Crom and Robin, both Robins, in case he calls them Bubbles, I believe, and he calls Crom Blue for, being a blue blood being royalty. So with his supports, I find him kind of funny, and I always kind of, as a character, I don't use him that often, unfortunately, despite the fact I like his personality. Because again, I end up using the child units more in combat due to the fact that They are just better, depending on who you pair them up with. And as an assassin, well, he starts off as thief. He has automatic ability to unlock doors and all that. So that doors, chests, so that gives him a lot more usability. A little bit more than Olivia, because again, I use her primarily for offense. But I might keep her as a dancer in this playthrough. But, yeah, Gaius' ability, because he can transform, if you use a second seal, he become a fighter, and then you can get soul and counter, which are kind of good for longevity, because if you change it back into like an assassin or a trickster, personally I prefer assassin. He can dish out quite a bit of damage, even though he gets access to what? Just lethality, soul, and I believe Astra. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I might put that in there or not. Because certain characters, I keep them as like, alright, this class, alright, none. Stuff like that. Just kind of like, not joke around, have fun, but kind of like, these are kind of like the quote-unquote canon classes for them, if you want to give them anything. Pan. S tier, mainly for her personality and the way that she kind of reacts to a good majority of the cast. Since Pan is a Togwell, in the past they were like hunted down because they could transform to beasts, held as slaves. You could kind of get the idea. So she has a natural disdain for most of humanity at first when you first meet her. The only reason she shows up with Gaius in that chapter is to save the Exalt, because she owed a debt to like one of the previous Exalts who were nice to her people. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then when she goes around and talks to like some of the characters, she's quite distant from a majority of them, with the kind of the exception of like Robin. She purposely kind of goes after Frederick because he dropped something, and when she charges at him to like in her beast form being a giant bunny, Frederick automatically panics because he remembers something about her childhood, and she can sense it. Because Togwell, I get being like kind of like part animal because it can, transform into them. It's like, oh, they could sense the fear. Because I believe one of her quotes, like one of her critical quotes, and technically a skill quote if you get lethality with her. She's like, I smell your fear. And she's kind of just nice or indifferent to Robin at first. He's like, oh, I want to know more about people. He cooks for her, and he makes a joke about it. He's like, oh, how'd you know? He's like, wait, you serious? But yeah, as a unit, though, she's kind of middling in comparison to like someone like Noe. Sure, she has like, I believe, a lot more avoid, speed, and skill than Noe, but Noe's like natural defensive takiness, and the fact that her attack is also very, very low for Pan. I believe like if you don't get a DLC skill called Limit Breaker, you get only like 38 attack based without her transformation in Togwell form, which only gives her like +3 in terms of attack. So unfortunately, yeah. But you do want to pass off on her skills. I would put her in A tier, but I actually do like her character a lot more, which it kind of keeps her in S tier. Is that she gets access to Lance Breakers, so she can avoid Beast Killers, which do affect her, regardless of what class she's in. Kind of like the same with Noe. Like, if Noe's a Dark Knight, she could still be affected by the Worm Slayers. The same way that Pan's affected by the Beast Killers, regardless of her class. Get Beast Killers, she can at least avoid it. She doesn't have access to Gale Force, unfortunately. But, again, like, it's mostly her personality and the characters that keep them in S tier. Now, we're going to move on to one of the main antagonists of the game, or at least for like the first third of it, Gangrel. Gangrel's an F tier. Now here's the thing. He is, I believe, a spot pass character, meaning later on down the line they released update where you can get like the boss characters that you fought against, or characters in game that died that people generally really like. Apparently Gangrel was one of them, because once you defeat him in Chapter 13, after gaining access to Olivia, who's probably should have been way later, now that I think about it. Once you get access to him, you have to talk to him 3 times with Crom, meaning you deliberately have to put yourself in harm's way against enemies who are significantly strong because the parallel quests that you go off, the paralogs that you try to get them in, are in the 20s. Meaning they're like some of the most difficult quests in the game, barring like the DLC like endgame quests, like Apotheosis. I probably said that wrong. Where he makes it difficult. Now, as a character, Gangrel's just a giant a-hole. Let's not beat around the bush. Later in the spot pass, when you talk with Robin, I believe, I'm not sure if it's male or female, it's one of them. He says he wanted to have the Fire Emblem to unite all of the world against against Grima, because apparently he knew about that. Yeah, not against Grima, against Walhart, because he knew about that. Yeah, sure, I'm calling BS on that. Because the way he's depicted in the story is that he's a bloodthirsty king who wants revenge against the Lees for what their previous exalt before Emmerman attacked. Like the first exalt, Crom Lissette, Emmerman's father, the one who was just like bloodthirsty, who went on a campaign against Plegia, and he wants to do that. It's like, oh, but then you learn back to, oh, he grew up in a gutter, he had to be ruthless and cutthroat and stuff. I don't care. Like, the actions depict, he can have a sad backstory. That's not what I'm against. It's just like the actions that he takes place early in the game, it kind of goes against the character, what he's like, he was raised in gutter, like might makes right and all that. He, as a character, lost his chance because it's at the very, very end of the game. Like, there's only like 2 or 3 chapters left. And then you get access to Gangrel. I was like, oh, here's my depressing backstory and the reason why I wanted to take on Elise. No, you don't get access to that. Even that, so his character is primarily why he's in F tier. As a unit, he's fine. I really don't care. He has access to 11 sword, which he can use to attack from a distance. Okay. He's not even that difficult as a boss either, because he's a trickster class. 11 sword, me being overpowered because I train up my characters. Even then, like, it was very, very easy to defeat him. Anyways, yeah, Gangrel's an F tier. I don't like him. I've used him. I've ranked up supports for Robin, male Robin, because the spot pass characters only have 3 supports in total. Robin, both forms of Robin, and actually 4, I guess. No, it's 3, because you have Robin, and then their kid. No, yeah, 2. 2 versions of support, and then like and then an extra one depending if you can actually marry them or not. Okay, so now we're going into the next, I guess, Aversa. Aversa, personally, I put her in S tier. I would, but if I'm going to be like, screw it. Yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of like in the same boat as Gangrel, where it's like, oh, why is one in F tier? Why is one in F tier but the other's in S tier? Well, the whole reason why I like Gangrel, it's just like he's still quote unquote doing bad by the time you go and recruit them. Well, as Aversa, who after you defeat her and find out like her backstory, it's like, oh, she's not as bad, and she still rightfully stays away from most of the shepherds because she feels like she doesn't deserve to be trusted, whereas Gangrel just kind of sticks around because he has nothing better to do. And his ending's a little bit more depressing. Now that I think about it, I believe even if you save him, he like goes off and dies in a gutter. Whereas Aversa, I think Aversa seals away her powers, or she moves to a remote village if you don't marry her with Robin, to just basically live a normal life. But as a character, it's like, yeah, she purposely also tries to stay away from the rest of the shepherds. She teases Robin at first to the point where it easily riles Robin up to the point where he's like, alright, I don't care, be eaten by bears. She got that mad. But once they reconcile, it's like, she realizes, yeah, I kind of screwed up. Female Robin's kind of less important because like they're both working underneath Crom. They have a competition as well. They respect each other, even though it's like, it's kind of like a typical support in a way, or it's like you know where it's going in a sense. Whereas with Robin and Versa, it's like, I don't know. Another reason why she could be in S tier is because she has access to a unique skill that only she has and can pass down to Morgan if you choose to marry Robin to her. She gets access to Shadow Gift. Now, Shadow Gift is an ability that allows a mage user to use dark magic regardless of the class they're in. And despite the fact there's two classes in the game called Dark Flyer and Dark Knight, they can't use dark magic. So, with that, she can use dark magic in any class she's in. And she also has access to Gale Force. She also has access to Tome Fair, Lance Fair. So even if you're kind of middling on damage with her, you can like buff her up to an extent. Whereas with characters like a Gangrel, you can't really do that. And if you're going after these characters anyway, her chapter is actually one of the most difficult and satisfying chapters to kind of beat. Her prologue. You know why? Because you face yourself. You play the theme of I'll face myself for Persona 4 here if I wanted to. Because, guess what? Every character that you bring into the fight to do in this chapter, you fight yourself. So say if you took in your best units. Say you take in Robin, Crom, Longku, Frederick, Noe, Maribel, and say you have them all like max stats, max movement, everything, max support, all that. Yeah, guess what? They have all your weapons and all your supports too. So it's a mirror match, and I love it, but it's also difficult as all hell, which makes it quite satisfying when you beat it. So, I guess that's another reason why she'd be put in S tier, even though she still is like a terrible character, even though she's kind of like a server character for most of the game. Whereas Gangrel and a few other characters are mainstay antagonists. I'm not covering Everman yet because she's another spot pass character, but she will get one later down the line. Trishay. She's okay. I personally have no problem with Trishay. I don't use her all that often because being that she's a Wyvern, yeah, she hits very, very hard. And she's actually pretty decent fast at decent skill. The problem is resistance. Resistance is bad. Even with Iote's shield from a DLC, from one of the DLCs, she still takes a lot of damage to magic. And being that she's a primarily axe user, even though she gets access to Swordbreaker, more often than not, she still gets hit by swords due to how high in BS the skill rates for enemies are on Lunatic and Lunatic Plus. So, personally, I still think she's a good unit. It's just like her combat output against certain types of enemies in certain ways makes it difficult to use her. And I believe she's like one of the last two Gen 1 units that you can use before you start hitting Gen 2 units. Or Gen like 1.5, 2.5, whatever the heck you want to call them. As a character, I like her. She's kind of basic. She has like the nice... As a character, she comes off very nice and very protective. But it's like, make her mad, and apparently she's like one of the strongest shepherds, apparently. Because if you go to supplemental material, say you tick her off, I believe it was in Fire Emblem Heroes, when Rinka was added, and she's going around challenging like the strongest heroes, and she fights Effie's like, oh yeah, I'm strong, but I'm not the strongest. It's actually Trishay, because Trishay, I believe Rinka insulted Minerva, her pet dragon, and she just knocked her out like instantly, threw her out of the ring. So Trishay is apparently like one of the strongest shepherd, is like physically I believe the strongest shepherd. She, despite the fact that she's really nice and I won't say domesticated, she's very polite, she's like into like weird things like bugs and strong enemies. She finds the Risen kind of cute. If you play one of the DLC ones, the Risen one where you fight the Risen and then you can like grow stronger from that. It's like the ESP like farm one. I don't remember what it's called right off the top of my head. But if you use her, she calls them like cute and like adorable. She wants to keep one for like Minerva to play with. So it's kind of strange that she's into that, but also being very nice, polite. And she's also vassal, servant, retainer to Varian. And Varian kind of messes around with that, but then Trishay immediately knocks him down and threatens him, which he automatically gets scared of. So she does have like a personality and power behind her words. Now, moving on to Henry. Henry's S tier. Henry, I believe, is kind of psychotic in a way. He's the second natural dark mage I believe you get access to, and the only one. if you don't like deliberately go out your way to pair up characters so they can merge them in a way. He is, like I said, kind of psychotic because he likes blood, death, murder. He likes hexes. He likes crows. He grew up with animals, and by the way, he's the one who warned Pan about the assassination attempt on Emmerman. So, no, the reason why he did that, because it wouldn't be as fun if at least just lost, like right away. That's his own words. Right. If you also support with Pan, it's like, oh, like she knows. Like, I believe that she knows his animals are nice to him or don't run away from him, or I believe it's that she notices that he has like, I believe like calmness around animals, and he states like, oh yeah, I was growing up by, like my parents didn't like me all that much, so I was like raised by like the local wildlife. I believe he was raised by wolves. And like when he's saying going about being psychotic, when he has a support conversation with Rick in here, he does like he also says like all the people we were fighting, like all like the mini bosses, especially a character like Mustafa, who gets his own chapter and unique theme. When you fight him, it's like, don't you dare say her name. He flat says, oh yeah, he's like a father figure to me. All these people killed. Oh yeah, they were really nice. They didn't do anything bad. And then Rickon reasonably gets distraught over that. He's like, these are people. They have lives. What have we done? And then Rickon's like, it's not that big of a deal. He also has weird hexes in comparison to Tharja. Because he creates a body swap hex and ability to manipulate time, I believe. Because he's like, oh yeah, I create a hex where anything you broke, it'll rewind back to that point, but it can only be for a while before it breaks again. He also body swaps Samiya in one of their supports, which is kind of hilarious. Because guess what, Samiya can also share support with the psychopathic character from Elise. But I also do like him because he's actually surprisingly a good father. Yeah, again, he's nice. He's just kind of open about his kind of craziness. He's also very willing to follow orders. Because when Robin sets out, like, oh, hey, do this. Oh, why can't we use Risen? Oh, because they'll kill the village. Okay, I won't use them. So he's actually a pretty nice character all around. He has access to Wrath and Vengeance, just no Vantage, unfortunately. Wrath and Vengeance actually works out for him, so he's able to do some Nosferatu tanking with that, with additional crit. So yeah, Henry, yay. Now, I actually might cut off here is like, okay, here's the tier list for all of like Gen 1 and a little bit of Gen 1.5. And like one spot fast character, two spot fast characters because they were like, one was the main antagonist, one was a lackey. So for S tier we have Muriel, Flavia, Pan, Gaius, Aversa, Henry. A tier, Lorabins, Crom, Wonku, Virian, Olivia, Basilio. B, we have Lissa, Samiya, Frederick, Noe, Tharja, Libra, Trishay. C, Maribel, Sully and Stahl, Vic, Gregor, Anna. D, Rickon, Donald, Kellum. F, Gangro. So next time we will be focusing on the spot pass units, well at least a few more of them, and then the Gen 2 units with a little bit of 1.5, 2.5, whatever you want to call them, thrown in. So I'm a Big Zero, and I'll catch you guys later. Oh boy, this is going to be fun.